I must say, Tariq and Nasheed did his big one with this one. And I can appreciate the research that was put into the making of this film, Microphone Check. So in this video, I will be doing a review on my experience at the red carpet premiere screening here in New York City and my reflections as I was watching the film and even after. So I purchased tickets to this screening maybe like over a week ago, and I was a bit disappointed that I kind of found out about this screening here in New York City relatively late. I did know about the actual documentary coming out, right? But it slipped my mind, like it was off my purview. So when I came across it on Instagram where he was promoting, I think it was Instagram or Facebook, where he was promoting the New York City red carpet premiere, I'm like, oh shit, let me grab my tickets. I go to Eventbrite. Turns out they had 2 screenings in one day here in New York City at the SBA Theater in Lower Manhattan on 23rd Street, right? So I noticed the first screening that was at 6 o'clock was sold out. And I'm like, I would have preferred to go to that one because, you know, your girl getting old, right? And, you know, us old folk, we got to be in bed by a certain time. We just used to being in bed. So I'm like, what the heck? I guess I'll go to the 10 o'clock screening. Granted, it happened Saturday, right? So it's a weekend screening, no work the next day, but still, right? My clock, Facebook has this thing, we like to shop up my videos, but let's continue. So like, I felt like my sleep clock is on a set schedule, right? And I did not want to necessarily go to the late screening and end up being tired, right? Or falling asleep. But it captured my interest, I would say. I didn't fall asleep, though I was at certain moments feeling like I was getting tired. So what I noticed, this documentary kind of captured was the origins of hip hop, right? And kind of reclaiming our ownership as foundational Black Americans of hip hop. So I'm sitting there in the theater, and by the way, I was sitting in the front, right? That's just where I like to sit, relatively close to the front, near the screen. I was probably like 2-3 feet away from Tariq and Nasheed. And I noticed, like, for a good hour, because the film was about 2 hours long in length, right? So I would say it had to be for a good 45 minutes to an hour, which I felt like it was drawn out. That bulk of the film was primarily focused on substantiating the origins of hip hop, right? Like who founded hip hop. And they were building a discussion, essentially a debate around, was it the Caribbean? Was it Jamaicans? Was it foundational Black Americans? And I found myself sitting in the theater like, why does it matter, right? Because they're cutting back and forth to the Jamaicans, right? And they're cutting, to Black Americans. And I'm just like, but we're all Black. So I'm like, why does it matter? And granted, of course, I know Tariq Nasheed relatively well, right? I went to the red carpet premiere of the Hidden Colors 5, Part 5 screening in LA. I was there. I did a whole movie review on that. I've been following Tariq Nasheed for about the same amount of time I've been following Dr. Umar Johnson, right? Since I had moved to Los Angeles back in 2016 to pursue my doctoral studies. So I understand that he has started this movement, right, to just reclaim our identity as Black Americans, to strengthen that identity, to empower us, right? To say, yes, we are aware that we may be descendants of enslaved Africans, but we have a very rich history right here in America. And we don't always have to, affiliate ourselves with other ethnic groups who oftentimes reject us, right? When we have our own rich culture, history, traditions right here in America. So he's kind of built upon that belief. And honestly, I don't see anything necessarily wrong with that. However, I feel that at times it can be somewhat divisive, right? So I'm sitting in the theater as he's having this protracted discussion, like with the people he's interviewing about, and obviously it's a kind of like a persuasive film, right? Like there is a point to the film as you see it begins to develop throughout the progression of the film, where they're making a point, right? They're making a point to say hip hop belongs to Black Americans, so let's take it back, right? And I'm like, why? Right, you ever notice how you come across like Black people who are very passionate, right? And we're, often passionate about a variety of different things, right? But you ever come across like a group of Black people that you see and it's so passionate about a particular topic, right? And they're debating and going back and forth, and you as the observer, you come up on it and you're like, isn't that serious? You just like, you want to kind of become the mediator and just a voice of, agreement to bring the opposing sides together to say, like, does it really matter? We're all, two sides of the same coin. Like, just can we all get along? And that's kind of how I felt in the beginning of this film screening yesterday, right? Last night, I'm just like, for like nearly, I felt it had to be close to an hour. And during that process, I almost kind of felt like I was losing interest in the film. And there were like a lot of moments of silence. Like I'm not only paying attention to the film itself, but I'm also paying attention to like my reactions to what's happening on the screen and also what's happening around me, right? And my immediate surroundings with the other audience members. And I could feel the energy. I felt like people, granted, it was the start of the film screening was 10 o'clock, so it was relatively late, right, for us to be watching a documentary, which turns out, granted, we all like hip hop, right? We're there for a common interest, which is hip hop. But I felt like the tone of the film was giving more academic, scholarly type of film. And it could very well be shown in a hip hop college class, right? Like I'm thinking like Ivy League, Columbia University, Harvard University, hip hop college course. This film actually could be used to educate students on the origins and the developmental progression of hip hop, because that's just the way it was put together. Like you can tell that it was a lot of research, put into it, and I guess it didn't meet my expectations in terms of, because I kind of expected to hear and to see not only sounds, right, of hip hop, of course, with the origins of it, right? Because I know, obviously, Tariq Nasheed is a historian, so it's really about the history, not necessarily about like the current state. But I feel like the current state obviously evolved from the roots, right? So yeah, I guess I expected to hear more like sounds of hip hop, especially things that I relate to. I grew up in the 80s, and there was pieces there, but then it dawned on me, like, obviously that would be expensive to get those permissions, the copyright permissions to actually play, to incorporate those clips in the film. So when I finally got over the fact that, okay, it's not going to be actual sounds of hip hop, right? Like clips of different songs, hip hop songs that we are all familiar with in the film, though there were some like dated way back, right? I don't know what era, maybe I will say the 70s or the 80s, like old school. So they did have some sounds from that era, but not like, I would say like 90s hip hop or in 2000s. So I'm just like, okay, I feel like that's kind of what took people in and out of the film, and you can feel the energy and the response of people as we're sitting there watching it. And I'm thinking to myself at these moments, like, what could make this documentary more lively, more entertaining, essentially? And there were moments that were entertaining, but it wasn't necessarily an entertainment piece. So if you are watching this film to be entertained, it's not that. It's education. It's more educational than it's entertaining, though there were humorous elements to it. So once they finally got past that point where they were able to solidify who started hip-hop, which is obviously is Black Americans, the film kind of progressed and to show different elements of hip-hop. Like, what makes hip-hop hip-hop, right? The cadence, right, of the beat and the way they rhyme to the beat and the graffiti. I thought the graffiti piece was interesting, and he had some people in the film. I was thinking, like, wow, Tariq Nasheed is very resourceful, and he has some really serious connects, because he had people in the film who actually were the progenitors of hip hop, right? They were on the scene early on, like they were the first ones there, right? In terms of witnessing and experiencing and creating, what we pride ourselves in today, like the origin. These were the people. So he had those people in the film. I think like the first female MC. And he had the guy Cornbread, the graffiti artist, and I thought that part was funny. And like there were moments, like I say, that were humorous throughout the film that were somewhat entertaining and did get a laugh out of the audience, Speaking relatively to the point of Cornbread, right, where this graffiti artist, like he brought some comedic relief, because he was just saying how he tagged his name Cornbread, which he got the name, I guess, from prison, because he's just like cornbread, but he tagged it like everywhere across New York City, and that's how he was able to build up his notoriety and his fame within the hip-hop era. And then the point where he said he went to the zoo, or was it the Bronx Zoo? He went to some zoo and he like tagged the actual elephant with corn, like, so we laughed at that. There were some moments where, they use the word nigga, but in a context that obviously we can all relate to, right? I did like how he linked hip hop to our history as enslaved African people, and how it was kind of birthed out of that time period, coming out of slavery, and this is what we use to kind of get through. He talked about how, I forget the actual term he used, it was like 12, something like that, but we call it ranking in the South, where, this is how people build up their sense of resiliency as Black people. And they spoke about it in terms of a functional purpose, where it was almost like a birthright, or a rite of passage, I would say, so to speak, where, you had to kind of endure these insults from your peers, right? Growing up, people would talk about any and everything from head to toe, your family. They would point out like your weaknesses. And it really wasn't so much about what they said as it was about your response to it, and if you had a comeback or if you were just able to take it, and they talked about the functional purpose of, being able to withstand those ranks or people kind of attacking you, your peers, right, attacking you, because it kind of prepared you for the real world, right, facing white supremacy. I did like that piece. I just felt like it wasn't enough linkage between just the culture of hip hop and the greater context of our society. I would love to see like more of that in the film. Of course, because I come from this perspective of looking at things through a socio-political lens. Like, I look at almost everything through a socio-political kind of grand scheme of things, right? So I did appreciate those moments. I did see, though, because I did catch on to how there were elements of this film that future generations may see, like looking back, right, watching this film as we progressed, right, through time and through decades, and they watch this film, let's say 10 years from now, 20 years from now, like you will be able to see, okay, you will know this film was made during this era. And how will you know? It was the AI. So there were a number of scenes. It was just really intermittently woven throughout the entire film where he used images, AI images. And I think even AI, like clips, like video, moving images of people that capture the time frame back then. Let's say at parties, they were went to hip hop parties back then, but you can tell it was AI. Everyone knows what AI looks like, so I'm just like, AI. I did appreciate that over those cheesy clip art images that he had plastered throughout his Hidden Colors 5 series, whatever, Hidden Colors Part 5 that I went to, and I spoke on this in my review. I'm just like, I mean, granted, I know, whatever we see on screen, obviously it's a reflection of the actual budget and the resources they have available to make the film. I understand that part in terms of filmmaking. Granted, I went to school for filmmaking myself when I was living out in Los Angeles, so I get that. I hate that this video is chopping up, but I get that. So I did appreciate how this film, it clearly showed that he invested time, money, resources, and some thought into making the film. So I do appreciate that. And what else can I say? Overall, I definitely would give it 5 stars. Just based on the mere function of the film, because I think the whole point of film or storytelling, right, is to communicate a message. And through that communication, right, you may elicit certain thoughts, emotion, you should really, right, out of your viewers or your readers if you're an author or writer. And I felt like that film, it did that for me, right? It made me think. It took us back to that time. I like, films that can take you out of your present moment, right? Whatever you're going through, whatever has been on your mind that day coming into the theater, right? It pulls you out of that, and it took us back, and it put us in that era, like, of how things were. It felt very real, right? Just how he created the images and the sequence, of events that took place, even though, like I say, I felt like it was kind of drawn out with this whole debate that they, like, he set the stage. It was like a foundational piece where he set the foundation for what the film was about to kind of prove the point, like, listen, this is our shit. And once that was established after a good hour into the film, it was like, okay, now we can talk about the different elements, right? Now that we have reclaim what's ours. And yeah, it made me think. Like I say, a good film or a good story makes you think. Makes you use your brain, right? And it made me think, like, why is this so important? And it did kind of allude to that in certain scenes where they showed a clip from what is this called? The Drink Champs, which is like a podcast. It's a radio show that they have on YouTube, and the clip was referencing like a dialogue about Puerto Ricans having some ownership in the origins of hip hop, I think. And so they was like, hold on, let's get this shit straight, right? So it obviously kind of set the reference point for the motivation behind the film, and like, why are we even having this discussion in the first place? The reason why I asked that question, like, why are we having this discussion? Because it's just like, we know. Black people don't, like, who started hip-hop. Like, we know that's our shit. But then they even cleared up the misconception about it starting from a party, because oftentimes, in talking about the history of hip-hop, they take you back to the Bronx and this whole block party, whatever, in the Bronx. And it's just like, that's not necessarily the start. Because they say, like, before the party, You trying to say hip hop didn't exist? Like hip hop just miraculously emerged at the scene of the party? No, right? So they took it back all the way back to the very beginnings and show artists who one may not even look at or to consider to be like hip hop in terms of like disco and country music. You're like, wait, this is hip hop. So they broke it down to explain that what is rap, right? Hip hop is just, rap. And what is rap? Is rhyming to the beats. And they've been rhyming, like black people, we've been rhyming. This has been our coping skill out of slavery, just putting a string of words together to a beat that makes sense. That's hip hop. So I like that. I like that Tariq Nasheed has been very persistent and dedicated and married to the movement of this FBA, Foundational Black Americans. It's just like, because granted, yes, our history, our culture has been interrupted and gentrified in so many different aspects. And again, this film also made me think, okay, they're doing this film with regards to hip hop. Like, there's so many different arenas that we can apply this same procedure to, these same methods to, right? In terms of housing, the housing crisis, and, education, and dating, and of course he did that with the Hidden Colors, right? To talk about the different aspects of how white supremacy, or the system of what it is disrupting the progression of Black Americans and many different facets of our well-being, right? Especially as it relates to education and healthcare. And I can never forget the quote, and I'm paraphrasing from Hidden Colors 5, where he was like, we talk about we in a race war and we want to go to war with our oppressor, but he was like, how can we go to war? How can we strap up our boots when our ankles are swollen, right? From, people who have diabetes. I'm like, damn, that was a low fucking blow, man. I would never forget that. But, it's so many different ways that we can apply what he did here in this film, Microphone Check, to other areas that we are negatively impacted by as African people, or Black American people. And I feel like, leaving the film, and even when I got home, I was still thinking about it. I'm like, I know this is probably part 1 of this series, right? It has to be, because there's more to the story. I felt like this film only touched the surface. It did not cover everything. There's so many different things. I'm like, wait, what about the present day hip hop artists? Like, not even just the present day. What about like in the 90s? And to make a film about hip hop and I don't remember ever seeing, what's his face? Like Nas or Jay-Z, like 50 Cent, like, how can we make a film about hip hop? But I get it, like, to obviously have them in the film is costly. Even to have an image of someone else, like, as famous and, as, financially successful as Jay-Z, like, that shit obviously would cost money. I understand, like, getting those permissions to use copyrighted images, copyrighted music, copyrighted anything into a piece that you are producing and selling is costly, right? So I appreciate what he was able to get and who he was able to get in his actual film, because I know it costs money. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more of this. I'm looking forward to more films by Tariq Nasheed. And I have a respect for him. I have a respect for him because I feel like he's a man of his word. If he say he's going to do something, he's done it. Like with the Hidden History Museum, boom, he developed this idea. He had this idea that came to him, to put what he's been doing in film into this actual physical space that people can congregate and explore and learn about our roots. And he did that. Now, of course, he's being attacked by different members of the Black community to say, oh, well, is it really a museum, right? It looks more like a nightclub or just this multi-purpose, multi-function event space where he's, held multiple events and this and that. But I can understand why he's doing those things too, because it helps to generate money and funds, and that's what's needed. I mean, no one has talked shit about other museums who have events, right? Just because a place has been consecrated as for one particular function, like a museum, doesn't mean that it can't be used for other things, right? I mean, me of all people, like, museums is one of my favorite things to do. Like, I am a museum geek, and I've been to many different museums across this country, and especially, like, for example, Brooklyn Museum, right? They have different functions there. Granted, there's art, there's history, but there's other things too beyond that. They sell alcohol there, wine, wine tasting, all kinds of shit, right? So it's not necessarily limited to one particular thing, right, that you can use the museum for. And even if it is a space where people can congregate to just discuss our culture, discuss our history, to appreciate our art, right, which reflects upon our life, and our experience, and just to mark a point in time, like, this happened, right, and we're still here. I can appreciate that. So yeah, I love this film. I definitely would give it 5 stars. And I think the people who were in the audience would say the same, just based on the reactions. Like, throughout the film, there were people laughing, there were people clapping, especially towards the end, because it felt like, yes, it was very motivational. Just like, yes, this is our shit. They're not going to take over, right? Like, even though they have tried, it's just like, hold on, we coming back for hours, right? And I think, at the beginning of the film, even though I questioned, like, but why? Why is this even, like, why the debate, right? Why is this even important? But as the film progressed, it's like, okay, I get it. It makes sense, right? Point understood. So yeah, I'm about to head out to Brooklyn, actually. But I just wanted to do this review because I can appreciate a really good film. Anyone who knows me knows that I really don't watch TV like that. I don't get caught up in, like, the popular hip shows that are out with pop culture. Like, that's not me. But when it comes to a really good story, good film, I'm there. So on that note, you guys, if you have seen this particular film, feel free to share your thoughts, your comments below. I noticed that on the website for this film, he is touring it across the U.S., and I'm just like, big kudos to him. I don't see how he can be in all these different places, but I guess that's just a lifestyle of a person who, is busy. So big kudos to him. Kudos to Tariq, because he didn't have to show up at the 10 o'clock screening, but he was there. Like, your boy was there, because I didn't figure he was home. Like, okay, 6 o'clock will make sense, all right? It's a reasonable time, but 10 o'clock, but your boy was there. He's just so down to earth. He's so personable. He's a family man. Much kudos to him. On that note, I will catch you all later, and feel free to drop your comments below.